Hi folks, this is Professor Koenig and I am wanting to talk about Chapter 10 in our Introducing Communication Theory book. And Chapter 10 is specifically about social penetration theory. And like a lot of these relationship theories, I feel like social penetration theory, sometimes called SPT, is yet another one where once you sort of get the gist of it, you're like, yes, of course, that makes perfect sense. And it's a very usable and relatable theory. And it's at the heart of social penetration theory. Two theorists whose names are Altman and Taylor, they said, really, when we think about social bonding between two people, so in an interpersonal relationship, there's a process of bonding that moves from the superficial levels to the intimate levels. So we've seen this in our past two relationship theories, right? We've seen how we start to negotiate ourselves in relationship. We see how we start to like weigh out whether relationships are good or bad. And this theory basically says, well, there's like a way that we do it. There's a way that we start to self-disclose. And self-disclosure is a big tenet of this theory, and how much and how and when we self-disclose and how often we're allowed to self-disclose, and we follow these certain trajectories, which are paths to closeness. So if I'm trying to get close with somebody, I might start on a superficial level to introduce my things about myself, and I mentioned this in some of the other chapters. I mean, what's the first thing you do when you meet somebody, when you're on a new date or whatever, you have a new friend? You talk about really superficial things. You talk about music you like, which, I mean, it's superficial, but it's not at the same time. It's introducing yourself to another person. You talk about movies and TV shows and things you did over the weekend that are like pretty simple. And then once you start to get to know somebody a little bit better, you start to introduce ideas about how you feel about things, maybe your ideologies, your affiliations with groups and social work networks and things like that. And so some of the assumptions of social penetration theory: relationships progress from non-intimate to intimate. So we start at superficial, we get real close. Relational development is generally systemic and predictable. So again, remember we talked about those rules that theorists have, like these, they say like relationships are have these like rules based, and not just relationships, but some theories do. But relationships specifically are very rule oriented, meaning we generally as human beings follow a very predictable path. And we don't know we're following these rules, but we do. We all act, for the most part, pretty similar when we first meet someone, when we first develop a relationship, when we're trying to get close to somebody. We really like follow a path that's pretty similar to the person down the street to us. Relational development includes depenetration and disillusion. So when we go through these processes of getting to know someone and getting closer to someone and like really penetrating, we also might not like that person. And disillusion and depenetration is the act of moving back, of going away from that. Maybe we don't want to get to know that person, or we get to know them and we don't like them specifically. Depenetrate is to the slow deterioration of a relationship. So think about your boyfriends, girlfriends that you've had over the years, or friends that just like, you know, it's like you don't talk to them one day and then another day, and then all of a sudden you haven't talked to them in like a week, a month, and what happened? You don't really know. You just like something about them, just they didn't need to be a part of your life, I guess. Disillusion is similar. I mean, it's like, I mean, the word is right there, right? So it's the idea that we are disillusioned with the relationship, and oftentimes this leads to the finality, the end of a relationship. Social penetration theory is very often called the onion theory, and it's called the onion theory because, as you might well understand, onions have this thick skin on the outside, like we have a thick skin metaphorically and physically, but metaphorically on the outside, and you start to peel the layers. And when you peel the layers, it actually, as an onion, it gets thinner and thinner, and you get closer and closer to the core of the onion. And at the core of the onion, just like at the core of you and your center, is who you really are. And we cannot develop strong relationships until we get there, until we're at the core of who we really are. You can't be close with someone without knowing them and without letting them know you. We have this public image, this theory says, and that's like that thick core, that thick outer layer, and that's like who it's not who I'm not pretending to be somebody I'm not, although sometimes we do, but I'm showing a certain side of myself that I want to show. And think about symbolic interactionism, and how we sort of negotiate ourselves, right? And put ourselves out there, and create ourselves based on what other people think about us and perceive of us. We are a part of that, right? Let me make sure I'm covering this. This is a pretty straightforward theory. There's some stages that we go through when we get to know somebody or when we're getting closer to somebody. So there's orientation stage, and that's like getting a feel for it, right? Revealing a little bit about yourself. There's the exploratory affective exchange, which is the emergence of an individual's personality. So when do you really show you? When do you really show, like, I'm actually kind of funny, or I'm actually kind of serious, or I really like anime, and I don't tell that to people right off the bat. That might come up in this second stage. The affective exchange is spontaneous communication. So why is it spontaneous? Why is that important? Well, when we are trying to show who we are, we're usually pretty calculated about it. So when I am trying to impress upon you a certain image of me, in sort of those thicker layers on the outside, well, I want to show you my best versions of me, my smartest versions of me. But when we get into this affective exchange stage, it's spontaneous because I don't need to be so calculated. I don't need to be so thoughtful in my words and my nonverbals. I can actually just be me, and it's okay because you know me now, or I'm okay with you getting to know me. So if I don't know, laugh spontaneously at a joke that I might not have wanted you to know I thought was funny, there's nothing I can do about it, and it's okay in those stages. And the stable exchange stage is when we're okay with each other for 100%, right? And so this is pretty much the root of this theory. There's a little bit more to it, sort of how we orient ourselves, how we think about critiquing this. And I haven't really covered a lot of the critique in these chapters because I think that you can cover those things yourself. But a pretty basic theory. The onion metaphor is perfect for this theory. I offer it to you to think about your own life and the relationships that you have and how you have developed those relationships, and this idea of peeling back versions of yourself until you get to who you really are. And that's that theory for you. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm always happy to answer them.